And a very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Issues and Attitudes. My name is Jeff Owens, Interim Director at WEIU Radio and TV. Today we have guests from the Charleston School District. If you're watching on your 13, we have Charleston School Superintendent Todd Vilardo in the middle. We have Kristen Holly over here to my right and Chad Burgett over here to my left. They are assistant superintendents as well at Charleston. I appreciate you all coming in. I know it's an absolutely busy time. If you're listening on radio, you're wondering why we have 4 people in the studio. Yes, we are following social distancing rules. We're scattered out and as much as we can be and doing that. So in case you're wondering why we have everybody here, I do appreciate you all coming in today. And I think I'll let Kristen start off a little bit. Kristen, you know, today we're July 13th upon taping of this show. Where does the school district stand right now as we look forward to fall 2020?
Well, we received a guidance document from the Illinois State Board of Education and the Illinois Department of Public Health. So our first responsibility was to review those requirements that we were given from the state and then develop a plan that follows those requirements. So where we stand today is we had a meeting last week with a group of stakeholders, teachers, paraprofessionals, secretaries, parents, some students, administrators, got together and reviewed a draft plan. We released that plan on our district's website for people to preview, and we're going to be presenting that to our school board here on Wednesday evening.
I'll go to Todd now. Todd, when you think about being the superintendent and all the stuff that's going on in the world as you prepare for the school, talk about your staff and what they've done so far as you start to plan for all the possibilities for fall 2020.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff, and thanks for having us on the show. It is an important show, and appreciate the work that you do, and we want to support that work for EIU as well. So we have always in Charleston, we believe we have the best staff around. And we have a caring staff, and they're dedicated to the kids. And so this is a difficult time for us as superintendents. It's a difficult time for the staff, difficult time for the parents in particular. But nevertheless, we remain focused on working together, collaborating with our entire school community to come up with a reopening plan that focuses on student and staff safety so we can return to learn and lead every day. And so, as Mrs. Holly mentioned, one of the things that we've done is form that transition planning team. And what we're going to do is give it our very best collective effort to align our reopening plan with the ISBE and IDPH guidelines. So it's a challenging work, but our focus, we remain resolute on reopening so that it's safe for our students and staff to learn every day.
And Chad, as you all have masks on today, talk about the big thing that people are talking about in the community, children being required to wear masks by the state, and how Charleston will implement that, and any concerns or game plans of how that will go in effect here come August.
Sure. It's part of the plan. Masks will be required for all students and staff. We're working on, each building's working on schedules for the students and staff to minimize exposure amongst students and then teachers who may come and go. High school students are going to have to move from classroom to classroom, but the lower grade levels of students will be contained in their classroom, and we'll try to keep them together as much as possible. We've also looked at safety and cleaning beyond the mask. You know, we're looking at our cleaning practices. We're having training this summer for our custodians just on best practices, just to review those, especially we've had some new staff members come in. We're going as far as replacing some of our water fountains with the refillable containers so students can use those instead of putting their mouth near a fountain. You know, just also using with students and teachers, just teachers reviewing hand washing, what to do when you cough, social distancing. There's going to be a lot of training, I think, especially for the younger students in kindergarten or first grade who may still be struggling with the concept of why are we wearing masks and things like that.
What could parents be doing right now to prepare their students for fall in terms of practicing masks and all the cleanliness, and whoever wants to answer?
Yeah,
what should
that's
they be
actually,
doing?
you mentioned practicing masks. That's one thing we've talked a lot about, is that we think it would be helpful for parents, and we encourage our staff to do the same, is practice in short intervals. So start with 20 or 30 minutes and then work up to 45 minutes and an hour, and just that would be really important for our students and our staff to practice wearing masks for longer periods of time. We plan on encouraging our staff to take students out for breaks, walk outside, everyone take your mask off for 10 minutes. I mean, we don't anticipate students wearing the mask for the full 5 hours, of course, weather permitting, but we'd like to see students be able to take breaks from their masks during
I was
the
going to
day.
ask you if there's going to be a possibility for students to kind of get free, for lack of a better way to say it, to get some air and just to kind of re-calm down maybe a little bit.
Yes, yeah, we do encourage as much practice with that as we can, but we certainly understand that it's difficult to wear masks for a long period of time, so we'll be looking to build breaks in.
The other question that comes up a lot for me when people ask is, who will administer the screenings as students come in, and how will that not create a little bit of a log jam at the different schools here in Charleston?
Yeah, so our screening and temperature checks will be conducted at the entrances, and our current plan is to have our paraprofessional staff and administrative staff conduct those depending on the building level.
Okay.
Mr. Burgett has worked with the principals to develop, and it's ongoing work, but they're going to be developing stations whereby students can enter, staff can enter, and get their screenings right there on site. And then we'll record those symptoms and so forth. The secretaries who typically take calls from parents about absences, they'll also record symptoms, and then as needed, those will be passed along to the local health department for contact tracing purposes.
So if a student thinks they feel all right, but is over that, 100.4 is it what it is? Is that the magic number? Will they be sent home immediately, or how does that work?
Yeah, so if there is a student or staff that is experiencing symptoms or that temperature threshold, then they'll need to be sent home immediately. They'll be quarantined into a separate space in our buildings, and then they would need to be picked up by their parent or guardian within 30 minutes. They would not be permitted to ride the bus home, for example.
Okay, and you will have busing then for the fall? That is the plan?
We do have busing for the fall, and we are encouraging our parents to transport their own children. Again, that's for purposes of social distancing on the buses as much as possible.
Now, Chad, the other thing that has been talked about is a little bit about, this, you can't have more than 50 people in a proximity, and there's really some disparity on, if we have 50 people here, what's the spacing between the next 50? And I was talking to your wife about that last week. So when you think about lunch or meetings or assemblies, is there ways to do that, or what's the game plan there?
When it comes to what I would call the morning meetings, when the students would gather in the gym and hear the announcements and celebrate achievements and things like that, I don't think we'll be able to do those anymore. We're looking at having our lunchtime meals and breakfast will probably be a lot of grab and go. So students going through and scooping out their own peas or vegetables or whatever, we won't be able to do that anymore. But I expect students will be in the classroom for their meal time.
Okay.
And then the larger gatherings that they will not be permitted during.
So you won't have the typical lunch like we've...
Right, won't have a typical lunch. And then you think about the assemblies the students enjoy when you get the guest speakers, and you may have half the third grade there. That'll no longer be able to take place as well.
All right, that's the question that I know is the tough one, I think, is somebody gets tested positive for COVID, let's say in the fall. Where is the line of demarcation of where you stop quarantining people? Because if you have a class with a teacher and 20 students, do all of them get quarantined? Do their families get quarantined? Do their families' friends? Can you explain how that's going to be? Because I think that's the toughest part of this process, at least from a parent outside looking in.
We would strictly follow the guidance of the local health department. That would be something that we would take. They would probably tell us what needs to be done.
Okay.
If a student needed to be quarantined or a class needed to be quarantined, that would come directly from the health department.
Okay. Anything else anybody wants to add on that one?
That's absolutely correct. They would conduct their own contact tracing. So that's in part why we have the symptoms being recorded, and then we provide that information to them. And then we'd also provide information to them with regard to student class rosters and so forth, so that will assist them in their contact tracing.
So the idea, if you caught them in the morning before they got to class, that might eliminate that if they didn't have the symptoms the day before.
Yes, and ideally before they even get to school or on the bus. And that's another, going back to your question about what parents can do preparing students, is just to be prepared to screen their children before they come to school. Even though we will screen them at school, it's preferred that they don't get on the bus, and if they have a fever and are experiencing symptoms, we need those students to be at home where they can not spread the germs to their class and the staff. So
that makes sense. Also, Todd had mentioned before we went on the air about a federal grant and some things that will help. Can you talk about that, or is that Chad?
Sure. The CARES grant, as a part of the CARES grant, there's what's called ESSER, which is an acronym which perhaps Chad or Kristen could explain what those letters stand for. But it's the ESSER funds, and we received over $700,000, Mr. Burgett.
$719,000.
And what Mr. Burgett and Mrs. Holly did was they worked together with our staff to determine immediate needs that we would need to open the school year in the fall. With remote learning, blended learning, and under any circumstances, such as in-person learning as well. So what we did was we surveyed our staff, we surveyed our parents, we did a lot of legwork up front in the spring and in the early summer to prepare for these expenditures, which they can tell you more about.
So,
Chad?
So on the expenditure side, the thing we looked at was through our survey and communication with parents and teachers, we knew a number of students did not have a personal computer device at home. So one thing we decided to do was we're purchasing 1,400 laptops for grades 7 through 12. So in case we were to go to remote learning, they would have a laptop. We also purchased Empower, which is a platform Mrs. Holly can speak to. When you have that many new devices in your building, we had to get staff to help manage those. So we added a couple technology staff members to support the device itself, but also to support the professional development for teachers. Then on the safety side, we ordered masks, we ordered face shields, we've ordered gowns, thermometers, a number of items along those lines, some sprayers. So after, and I know they're using them at EIU, but after the room's been thoroughly cleaned, there's a mixture of chemicals you put in to go through and you kind of mistify the room, or fogger is another term for it. So we can help with the cleaning supplies as well. But I think the learning platform, the management platform, is a really big piece to get the teachers, students, and parents on the same page. I think we were missing out on that last year, and
that's the Empower.
That's a
yes,
huge
it's
piece.
called
It's a huge
Empower. We did. Mr. Vilardo mentioned the survey that we sent out to students and staff and parents last spring at the end of remote learning, just to share feedback. And I would say one of the most common, the theme and the feedback that we received was the difficulty in managing so many different teachers using different ways to communicate and different ways to submit assignments and view videos. So the Empower, it's a learning management system. All of our staff, they start training actually this week. They will build all of their content into Empower, and then parents and students will have access to that. And so a student could log in, a parent could log in, and they can view the student's assignments. And if we needed to be in remote learning again, everything would be managed through Empower.
Tough question also. At what point does remote learning kick in? Is there a number, or is it all based on what the state or Coles County Health Department says? Do you know, Todd?
Yeah, so again, as I read the joint guidance from IDPH and ISBE, again, as Mrs. Holly mentioned, that's largely going to be controlled by our region, or which phase that we're in, and for Charleston, Coles County schools in particular, the Coles County Health Department and their contact tracing, and they'll give us the guidance with regard to, do we need to close down this particular class, a particular school, or the entire district.
That's what I was wondering. Is that a possibility that maybe one school stays open while others are closed, or is it all or nothing?
I think it could be a possibility.
Okay.
Yes, and then those students in that school, for example, would move into remote learning. You know, we often think that schools are places where students learn, and that's absolutely correct, but it's also the adults that learn. And so we learned a great deal from our spring remote learning experiences. As Mrs. Holly mentioned, we learned so much from that. And one of the things that we learned is that remote learning is extremely, extremely difficult on parents. And so that single standardized uniform platform across our district is going to be so helpful, not only to our educators and our students, but our parents as well.
It's also using the time we have now. I mean, going back to the spring, we didn't have time to prepare.
No, yeah, I remember when you were on. It was like,
yeah, we didn't have time. It happened to us. We did the best we could. I think now we have summer, and then again going up to our schedule next year with the early dismissal time. That gives our teachers time to collaborate and develop materials that will go into Empower. That way we are ready at a moment's notice for remote learning. If the health department tells us tomorrow your school's shut down, then we'll be in a position to be better prepared for a remote learning situation than we were in the spring.
And
Chad,
to be fair, when Mrs. Holly had been going through, and they were looking at these platforms pre-COVID, so it's something
Yes.
our district was talking about, but this COVID really shoving us in the direction where we had to choose a platform and get on it and start the training. So we had been looking at this, or she had been looking at this with a number of teachers well before, I say pre-COVID or before March.
There's different levels of scaredness, for lack of a better way to say it. A family just doesn't feel comfortable bringing their kid to a Charleston school. Can they remote learn from day one? Is that an option, or what are the plans for that?
That's
Yeah,
actually something we're looking at.
Yeah, I can start us out, Jeff. That's a very good question. The COVID-19, it's real, and there are real fears behind going back to school, and we want to validate those fears and those concerns. There's such a wide range of perspectives. So what we did again was surveyed our parents as well, and we found of the parents that responded to our survey, 77% of the parents indicated that they would have their children return to school with face coverings required, for example. However, what do you do with the other small percentage of students, and how do they learn effectively if they're going to learn remotely? And what can we do as a school district to support their remote learning? So Mrs. Holly and Mr. Burgett and I have been kicking around some ideas with our staff and our administrative team. And we have some ideas, but nothing solid as of yet. So hopefully we'll work on those over the next 30 days. Mrs. Holly, on that?
We just recently sent out a follow-up survey to the parents that took the initial survey, just with asking for a little bit more specificity in terms of their plans to come back. And if there were remote learning opportunity for their child, would they want to participate in that? So we feel like we have a little bit more accurate set of numbers to look at. But again, it's a very small percentage of our parents. So what we would do would be a sort of a small scale virtual learning. But again, we'd have to have 5 hours of instruction for them to be considered. It would be instructional time for them every day. So
our current plan is that teachers in the classroom, for those children who are learning at home, they would either pre-record a lesson and make it available to the children and their parents, or they would engage in synchronous learning where they would live stream their classroom so that children could view it at home with their parents. Nevertheless, we want to be open-minded and not lock out other ideas. We want to be able to think of other creative ways to support learning at home with parents, because we recognize how difficult that was last spring.
You talked a little bit about the input from the parents. Did the students have much input, or what were they saying, or what kind of were their thoughts when they were looking towards the fall 2020?
We did a survey for the students on remote learning last year, and we got a really excellent turnout from our students. We had a lot of students participate in that survey, and we learned very similar things than we did from the survey to the parents. They wanted a common platform. They wanted to have communication between all of their teachers come through one platform. We learned from the students that they prefer to be in school. They prefer to have contact with their teachers. They prefer to have video lessons. It was interesting. They also prefer to be held accountable for their work, which was interesting. They want to get grades and get credit and get feedback from their teachers on what they're learning at home.
That's
so,
good.
yeah.
Now, will grading be done any different, Chad, or will that?
I'm going to let Mrs. Holly.
Or is that you? Okay.
Grading will be very different. In the spring, of course, the state gave us a lot of guidance on, because it was unexpected and because students didn't have necessarily access to technology. The state provided us with guidelines on not letting a student have, basically a student wasn't permitted to fail based on their lack of engagement. Their grades were not allowed to be reduced. Moving into the fall, that we are going to grade differently. Students will be accountable if we are in remote learning. They will be accountable for remote learning. They will be graded on their engagement at home. They will be submitting assignments and getting feedback from teachers. It will be a very different, again, because we had more time to prepare, and we'll have time to hopefully prepare students for that.
Chad, on just a regular basis, we talk about getting back to school. Is there other things that Charleston's doing this year that are new initiatives, programs, or anything?
Just facilities related. I mean, we still have to maintain our buildings, prepare for students and teachers to come back. So this year, over the summer, we started a project on the middle school. They're going to replace a quarter of that roof. There was tuck pointing done at the 1926 portion of Jefferson, and then we noticed there were some cracks in the brick at the high school, so they moved over and took care of that as well. At Ashmore, new parking lots and new playground pavement there. Carl Sandburg, they're going to paint the outside on the west and south end. They're going to do that, I think, a week before school starts. And then I think the building that's got the biggest changes would be Mark Twain. They've got a new driveway, new parking lots. We've started work on the sports complex where there's some sidewalk between the concession stand and the ball diamonds because parents were walking through wet grass or mud. We're going to have a new handicap accessible entryway as well and some netting put up. So a lot of facilities projects going on. A lot of painting done this summer. We had a paint crew of district employees who painted all the interior of Mark Twain, and then Mark Twain's also getting new LED lighting in the classroom. So lots of things going on outside of curriculum and instruction to prepare for the upcoming school year.
A couple of other things I want to touch on. No visitors and obviously probably no travel in terms of at any of the schools, correct?
That's correct.
Right. Visitors would be confined to the main office area. We would not encourage visitors. We would not encourage guest speakers and so forth. Any outside agencies, we would hold them at bay as well. Field trips would be suspended. So yeah, we're trying to not lock down the entire school, but in a way, lock it out to any possible outside folks coming in who have little control over. We want to be able to control the environment.
That makes
for
sense.
Kids and staff.
You knew when to ask. Sports is the other big question. What are your thoughts on whether or not we will have fall sports, not have fall sports, get fall sports pushed back, move to spring?
Yeah, well, the initial guidance from the IHSA was a little bit conflicting, as we know, with the ISBE and IDPH guidelines. We in Charleston followed the IDPH and ISBE guidelines from the onset, indicating that student athletes could have contact over the summer, but they could not have physical contact with each other during the times they were together under our care. And so face coverings are required indoors. Any equipment that's issued or used by the students needs to be issued on an individual basis. Any shared equipment needs to be cleaned regularly and between use and so forth. So will we have sports, activities and so forth? That remains to be seen. If we do, as of today, I could see that we could have non-contact sports such as what did we mention? Cross country, golf would be one.
Tennis possibly.
Tennis possibly. Yeah. Sports like that don't have the close physical contact nature. Yeah.
So that would eliminate the Coles County Clash, correct? More than likely.
It appears that if we were to follow the guidelines today, we would not have the Coles County Clash tomorrow. But again, a lot could change. A lot of this could change in the next 15 minutes. So.
Another thing is you are putting on a brave face. Everybody puts on the brave face, and we're all trying to go out there and do our best to the community. But are you still concerned about this disease and what it can do if we don't continue to do the things we need to do in the community and nationwide?
Yeah, I think that there is a lot of concern out there. We're concerned as educational leaders. Again, that concern comes from Care for Kids, and again, we have the best staff. We believe the parents are very supportive in this community, and we want to partner with them to make sure that the kids and the staff are safe. Again, there's that fear out there, but we want to do everything that we can within our control to alleviate those fears, to bring people back safely and keep them healthy.
Kristen or Chad, want to add on to that? Or?
Yeah, I think we're putting together a plan just like all the other school districts are. And one of the principals I was talking, I believe it was Mr. Locke the other day, he said the key word this year is going to be adaptability. And I think I would throw in the word patience with that, on just from teachers, students, parents, and everyone as things are going to change, and as we do our best to put a plan that address most of the check marks and the guidelines, and you try to cover all your bases. There's going to be something pop up that we're going to, we didn't think about that, but
Yep. And when will the when will the parents of the students of the Charleston School District get the next bit of information, like this plan or an outline? And what's the timeline for you getting them, since we're about a month out?
So our draft plan is going to be presented to our Board of Education this coming Wednesday night.
Okay.
And as part of that plan, we also have a remote and blended remote learning day plan by law that we're supposed to also have approved by the district. And so that's going to go to the board Wednesday night. And then after that, we'll have more information that will be presented to our public. As part of the information sharing, we want to not only share the plan itself, the paper document, the language of it, but we also want to provide parents and staff with the opportunities to have two-way communication. So we're kicking around the idea of doing a town hall meeting through Zoom perhaps, or some other virtual format, so people can ask questions and get responses through those means. And then perhaps videos by us or our staff helping parents at home with regard to how to teach your children healthy hygiene at home, face covering, wearing at home, to prepare them for the school year. Because we want to partner with the parents, and when the parents and the educators are on the same page, it's a win for the kids.
There you go. Got a brain lock there for a second. When you think about the fall, is there any other major concerns or other things that we didn't talk about today that you want to get the information out? We have a couple minutes left.
I would just say, Mr. Burgett mentioned adaptability and flexibility. I mean, as people know, this is changing. It changes every minute, and the phase that we're in can also change, and the guidelines from the Illinois Department of Public Health could also change. So I think we're, as everybody said here, I think we're doing the best we can to make sure we're following the guidelines and keeping student and staff safety first, but I think there's got to be some flexibility going into it. And I think the other piece would be to encourage parents to consider all the options that they have for daycare. Again, if we go into remote learning, or they shut down the schools or shut down a classroom, parents need to start exploring options for daycare. We wish they didn't have to. It's out of our control, but this is the time to start planning for multiple scenarios.
Will each of your instructors, like the teachers, like the first couple of days, are they just going to have maybe some open communication instead of teaching, just kind of going through, hey, we all know we're under weird times,
Yes.
You got to wear these masks, and talk a little bit, we're almost out of time, but explain that if someone could.
Yeah, I would anticipate the first week of school or two, and I mean, the way I'm communicating it with teachers at this point is every minute that you have with students, we need to take advantage of in-person instruction, that we're also using that time to not only address their social emotional health. We know students have been in a period of grief and had some distance from each other, but we also need to use that time to teach our students how to remote learn for when that day, if that day happens, and again, teach them those hygiene habits. And we have lots of work to do with students when they get back.
Chad, Todd, and Kristen, as time flew by, I have more things I want to ask, but we're out of time. I do sincerely appreciate you coming in and getting this information out to the people of Charleston and the students and parents. So thank you all so much for coming in.
Thank you for having us.
All right. Well, we'll have more as the summer continues. This is WEIU, you're 13, and you're on WEIU TV. Everybody have a great day.